not trying, but why are you giving up so soon? Don't you want to crush it? Don't you want to? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. It was 8 a.m. and my neck was a little stiff. I was like, my neck's a little stiff. And she starts going into something about like, oh, she starts giving me some shit that I've known forever. And I go, I'm just 47. I just thought that would be like a thing that would shut her the fuck up. And it kind of did. She goes, oh, okay. She goes, if you need to leave or anything, oh, no, we're allowed to stay out for at least 55 minutes at a time. My technology minder will be here in about 10 minutes. Because I'd like to sign up again using ClassPass, but I don't fucking know how. Do you take pencils? How do I do that? She looks at me and she goes, I just thought you were hungover. I'm like, who the fuck goes to class hungover? What generation is this? What's happening? Why would anyone go to a Pilates class at 8 a.m. hungover? Dudes, young people, if you're doing that shit, stop it. You don't need to be always grinding or whatever the fuck it's called. Take a sick day. Pay the $15 cancel fee. If you're hungover, you don't have to work out for a month. Just relax.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hello, Dan. Yes, I can.
Okay, just want to make sure my mic was working right.
Yes, and I don't know. I've got this streaming on 2 channels, mine and my friend and my backup channel, and I have no idea. Oh, there's 2 people watching. Okay, because I don't see it showing up on my channel, and I was shocked that it let me because I thought I was in timeout. But anyway. Back to yes, we enjoyed your conversation last week.
Cool.
Generations, and I'm glad you've come back and decided to grace us with your presence again. I told a few friends they were very happy to know you were coming back. They were excited. So
cool.
How was your week, and do you have any ideas of things that you've been thinking about this week?
My week was okay. It was just another work week, the usual, the grind. I, in addition to following history, I also, pay attention to politics because the two are connected in a lot of ways. It was an interesting week. Yesterday was a kind of a fun news day because I got to watch, Disney just savage Ron DeSantis, and that was fun to watch.
What was that? I missed it. I don't know what
you didn't catch? Okay. So, you may or may not be aware, the governor of Florida has gotten himself into a bit of a pissing match with Disney. Oh, you hadn't heard? Okay, so.
Oh, do tell the juicy news.
Okay, so this goes back. Okay, so a while back. Some background. Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is trying to get the Republican nomination for next year's election. Towards that end, he's making a play for Trump's voters. So towards that end, he's being basically more of an asshole to appeal to those folks. He's been making moves in that direction. One of those moves was to have his legislature pass this law that a lot of people have seen as basically homophobic and transphobic. Disney usually stays out of this kind of thing, but they got internal pressure, and so their previous CEO, what's his name, Chapek, first didn't say anything, and then he kind of made a mild statement saying, "Hey, we don't like this," but he didn't push it too far. That annoyed DeSantis, and he said something. So a bit of a back and forth. and then they got rid of Chapek, and Disney got rid of Chapek, and Iger came back in, and he said he was a little more assertive about it, and anyway, and DeSantis's administration there continued to. They made moves intended to piss off Disney, and so yesterday, Disney apparently I didn't know this, had been planning a new project. They were going to put in basically an office park, move a number of good-paying jobs from here in California to Florida, because they were going to get tax breaks and stuff, and presumably, I mean. It sucks that they'd be moving from here, but I can see how it would be a good business move for them. They'd set up a new office park, big investment. I mean, putting hundreds of millions of dollars. They would have been putting hundreds of millions of dollars into Florida, and they just said, "Nope, never mind. We're not doing it." So they just shanked DeSantis really bad. Yeah, I love.
Well, honestly, how much can they do in Florida right now? Isn't it being suspected of it's just going to break off anytime like California?
No, I mean, eventually, if this climate change thing keeps going in this direction, it's going to be underwater. But no, there's no earthquakes there.
Okay. Well, that's it. It's gonna sink off. It's just gonna.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, so. I mean,
hey, G Sharp.
This was supposed to be an investment in Florida around the level of about $1 billion that state is no longer going to get. So, and the timing was as savage as the move itself, because what's his name is supposed to announce that he's officially running for the nomination sometime next week. So he's got to do that, in the wake of this move by Disney, which just makes him look. It's like, enjoy that now. Yeah. So, wow. That was brutal. That was.
Do you think this is going to just keep happening?
What, the Disney DeSantis fight? I honestly have no idea how that's going to go. Disney's not leaving. I mean, you can't up stakes with they've got Disney World and they've got Epcot. They can't up stakes. But someone I was talking to, not an expert by any means, but I think it's a reasonable point of view, is they've got the money. They're a big institution. I think they're just going to wait this guy out. It's like sooner or later, like he'll leave before they do. He'll be out of. I mean, he's only got 4 more years in office. Disney plays the long game. They're just gonna make life hard for him and wait until he quits, or not quits. Wait until he leaves office, because his term will be up and he can't get. I don't think he can get reelected.
Right? Are you a fan of Santos?
Who? Ron DeSantis?
Yeah. Are you a fan of this person?
No, God, no. I think he's a piece of shit.
Okay, just asking. Yes. Are you a fan of Disney?
I mean, I like their products. I'm a big Marvel fan, so I was when I don't always like everything they do, but on the whole, there's room for no company is perfect. There's plenty of room for criticism with Disney, but on the whole, yeah, I like them.
Okay, fair. Some of us, I'm not saying it's me. I'm saying some people in this room find Disney to be full of, baby eaters or something, drinkers of blood, and Freemasonic.
Oh God! Okay. That reminds. Okay, the QAnon stuff.
Okay,
I can tie that. I can tie that back to generational theory, because it's something I've been thinking about.
Ooh, I like it.
So people have always been prone to conspiracy theories and wild imaginings. It's just something humans do. But I think it gets worse at certain times than others.
Okay.
It seems to me. Okay, all right. How much do you actually know about the theory? Because I feel like maybe I should be doing a primer on it.
I think in this room, you are pretty safe to assume that everyone knows the basic 101 generational studies.
Okay, so I think it gets worse during awakenings and during crises.
Okay.
Because there's something about those eras that just stirs people up.
Right.
Where it's definitely milder during highs, and even during unraveling, it's not quite as bad. But
Right.
awakenings and crises both ratchet it up. This whole QAnon, baby eating, blood drinking, all that stuff, that reminds me nothing so much of as a Maleficium.
Okay.
And that is back in the 1600s during that century's crisis. That's when you had the last witch trials, the whole Salem witch frenzy.
Okay.
That was during the crisis of that cycle. And I think part of it came about because, like any crisis, it was extremely stressful. This is one not a lot of people know about because it's not the part of history that gets a ton of attention, partly because it was so long ago. And anyway, but that was actually a pretty bad time. It opened in 1675 with two kind of events going on almost at the same time. Up in the northern colonies in New England, you had what's King Philip's War, where a war got touched off between the natives and the colonists, and that was brutal. One historian said that other than the very early years when it didn't look like it wasn't sure that the new settlers were going to make it, that was the closest the natives ever came to driving the English out.
Wow.
It was pretty savage. And then down in the southern colonies, there was a rebellion, what's called Bacon's Rebellion, because it was led by a guy named Nathaniel Bacon. It was a bunch of guys rebelling against the colonial government there. Big mess. Anyway, so it was a really wild and destructive time. Lot going on, and just all the things that come along during crisis. People get freaked out. Everyone's on edge. Everyone's tense. Everyone's scared. All kinds of bad shit is happening. You expect that more bad shit is coming, and that takes a toll on people. Kind of like the pandemic now. It drives everyone a little extra nuts.
So if we knew that this was the case because I totally agree with you, and I believe it mentions that even in the history of generations book. And so
they mentioned the witch trials. They do mention because that was kind of a signature thing. What's encouraging for me is that eventually the fever breaks. Like those witch trials in 1692 were the last time it's the last time it seemed like people believed in witches. It's like after that the fever broke and they're like, oh, we just went nuts a little bit. We're not going to do that anymore. So I'm hopeful
what
that
came right after the Salem witch trials. So what was the high that came after the Salem witch trials?
I don't remember the exact name, Helen Strauss give to it, but give me a moment and I will look that up.
Awesome. I can't memorize history. I don't remember names and stuff like that. My brain doesn't want to do people, places, or things now. It just wants to do patterns or like how. So I always think of the not the name. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay, they call it the Augustan Age of Empire, and that's because This is when England really begins to become I mean, at this point, the America is still just the colonies.
Right.
They call it the Augustan Age of Empire because this is when England really starts to become a world power. Before that, I mean, they were, an important country, but not the biggest deal.
Right.
This is when they begin to really become a major player. Here, I'll just read you their brief description.
Sure.
The Augustan Age of Empire. It's a high. That is a first turning. From they. I can tell you the exact years. I don't know if it matters to you. Witnessed the first confident flowering of provincial, meaning colonial civilization, with booming trade, rising living standards, recognizable urban centers in the north of the colonies, and massive imports, unfortunately, of African slaves to the southern colonies. Lauding social discipline, Americans took pride in the growing might of Britain's empire. Socially, this was the periwigged apogee of colonial politesse. Culturally, it was an age of credentials, wit, and Royal Society rationalism. The kind of dark side to this time,
Right.
the dark side to this time is the American slavery as we know it. This is when it really gets. I mean, it had already existed for 80 years by that point, but it's in this. But it was kind of like an ad hoc situation where people were just sort of making it up as they went along.
Right.
But it's in this time that they pass especially the southern states pass what are sometimes they get called the omnibus slave codes. Basically, this is when they took what people were just doing and turned it into law. When they codified it, when they said, "Yeah, this is how we do things here."
They wanted to make their evil deeds legal.
Yeah. And so that is a big dark spot.
And then blame me for it later. I see it. I wasn't even there then, but I get it. Sorry.
And that's it. It's in this era that what gets called the peculiar institution really becomes what it becomes. So highs are not always so great. They do sometimes. Even those have a dark side.
Well, I think that what happens is after the crisis, you have this period where everybody's just trying to settle. It's as if the water's been all stirred up and there's mud everywhere. And now we're going to sit back and wait for everything to settle. And in that time, a bunch of people die, a bunch of people get sick, people starve to death, blah, blah, blah. And then everyone starts to come back with the new laws, the new rule for society.
Yes. And sometimes they're not so good. I
don't think they're going to be too good this time. I don't have much hope for this one. I do. I'm not a fan. Much like I like Thomas Paine's ideas, but I don't. This is a pain in my butt now. This isn't the same kind.
Yeah. Well, I'm at least I won't go so far as to say optimistic, but I am hopeful about this next high. It'll be interesting to see. One way or the other, it'll be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will be. So going back to your original thought here, you were talking about the Q movement, and I think
it's an example of a stressful time making the already built-in human nature to think wacky shit get amplified. People get even more hysterical. It's hysteria. It's a form of hysteria, and it's a hysteria, and hysteria tends to get the worst during crises and during awakenings. People get extra crazy.
And we do know this. Whoops, I meant to take that off of there. We do know this. It was in the book from 1991. The thing is that I'm concerned as to why they are doing what they're doing instead of offering things.
Why are who doing what who's doing?
Well, say our president, our global leaders right now are not doing a very good job at letting people know that this is a stressful time. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to have soothing music free. We're going to have your favorite feel good, happy movies free. We're going to do things that are going to make this better. What they want to do is they want to give me things that seem free, but that it costs my signature. And if they really cared about us, they would be taking steps to show that. They'd be preparing you for the loneliness. They would be, offering anything and everything to make this a better experience. But it's all about money. And as I see people struggling right now, I also see all of my taxpayers' dollars going to space where they cannot go, nor have they been. What are we spending our money on? And that, that's what gets me mad about the generations is that it does tell us what was going to happen right here. And it is literally coming true almost verbatim what they wrote in that book. And they knew it and they didn't do anything to even stop it or slow it down. In fact, it appears as if the business world has encouraged and even, perpetrated the whole thing. Thoughts?
Well, let's see where to begin.
First, are you a member of any type of secret club, Dan, that I need to know about?
One is people are short-sighted. That's just always true everywhere. So there's that.
Say that though. Hang on, let me challenge that statement for a second because I do see what you're saying. And originally I'm like, yeah, I get that because I can be very short-sighted. But yet these are people who have on speed dials entire groups and corporate businesses that think for them. So it's hard for me to think that if I can think of it, and I'm a nobody without a degree, nor do I get paid for my thoughts, how come one of these billions of other people that they have working for them, or at least tens of thousands, hadn't come up with it? So how short-sighted, if the government is that short-sighted, then they should be fired.
Well, wait, hold on. Are you talking about the government or the business world?
Any and all. To me, it's all the same thing. It's all the same, different heads of the same dog.
Well, the problem with government, there's the short-sightedness, but there's also the, remember that cultural fight we were talking about last time?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, when you have a cultural fight, that means you got two different views of why things are happening. Everyone might agree on what's happening, although even there you get not everyone agrees that the same things are happening. But even when they do, you get differing opinions on why it's happening. If you have differing opinions on why it's happening, you're going to have different opinions on what to do about it, and so it becomes difficult to do anything.
Sure. Absolutely frozen in a sense because you don't really know what to do. Do you not think, though, that is also predicted, that people will kind of freeze in place, hence the terms winter and stuff being
used? A little bit, yeah. Or at least that there'll be a fight about it, which is what's still happening even now. For both good and ill, some of the answer to that is what's coming up, the climax. And again, I don't know exactly what it'll be. I just based on what I'm seeing, based on what
what are you rooting for?
There's the thing. There's no good climax. There's no. It's gonna. sometimes people ask me, do I think this, there's a few people I can talk to about this, not many, but a few. And, one thing that, how do you know that maybe this crisis is over? And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that before this crisis is over, armies are going to die. I mean, look at the last, the violence tends to get worse as with each crisis. And I mean, look at the last, ask the people of Dresden, ask the people of Stalingrad, ask the people of Nanking, not to mention Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So assuming this theory is right, and I think it is, we'll find out for sure. There's big bad coming, and I'm not sure what my favorite flavor of poison is.
You don't know how you want to kill yourself. By
Something like
dagger,
that.
by revolver, or by fork. How are you going out?
Yeah. I mean, I just hope that when whatever it is hits, and honestly, I expect it to hit in the next 24 months, maybe less. I don't think, whatever it is. And again, I can't tell you exactly what it is because I just don't know. Mm-hmm. I feel it's not that it's going to come to a conclusion, because the number and size of problems we have, it's going to take a few years to unwind all that. So, which is why I think Neil's right that this crisis will probably last until about 2030, give or take. But I think it's got the what they call the crisis climax, which is like the main event. If it's a movie, it'd be the big third act with the big action scene.
Right.
It would be
the final showdown.
The final showdown kind of thing. Yeah. It's if it's going to happen at all, it's got to kick off in the next 24 months.
Yeah. I
couldn't tell you exactly what it'll be because I don't know. I've been racking my brain trying to see what the most likely thing is. And there's a few candidates. One guy I talked to thinks his money is that it's going to be some sort of economic disruption. Okay. He might be right. I keep looking abroad.
That kind of, don't we?
Yeah. Well, he thinks worse. Walmart
is affected, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me. I'm looking at abroad. I'm looking at.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine. I don't know. There's
a lot of immigrants too going to a lot of countries that can't sustain those immigrants because they're struggling to sustain their own.
In some countries, yes, and in other countries, they should be welcoming those immigrants with open arms because have you seen the Japan is shrinking, South Korea is shrinking, Italy,
and welcome to take them, but there's countries that don't, and
if we're smarter people than me, there's a couple of Canadians who did a good study on how they think the world population is overall is going to shrink somewhat, and they're Canadians and they're happy the way their country takes more people in. They look at Australia and New Zealand are similar, and their advice they weren't talking directly to America, but their advice was for America, get a functional immigration system and take in as many people as you can, basically, because our birthrights are also not great. But then that's tied to the whole economic situation. We've got to get our economic situation as a whole more functional and fair. Right now, it isn't.
Well, they say it is a pattern to have immigration during these crises, right?
No. Typically, immigration goes down during crisis for a few reasons. One, when things are in chaos, you don't move around as much.
No, but before
and
they pop off, they do. That's how everybody.
oh,
right?
Awakenings and unravelings often have the most immigration. Yes, not crises, and often not highs. But yeah, awakenings and especially unravelings, yeah, those over and over.
Then maybe I'm misunderstanding. So Dan, let me because see, I think I have it backwards, or I'm not understanding what you're saying, or I'm thinking differently. My thought was they had the orphan trains, and so when they had World War I over in Europe, they had a lot of orphans between there and World War II, and then they were all sent over to Canada, the countries in America, and they had a lot of immigration coming along.
Oh, and even before that,
the wars pop off. People start to leave that have money right before the Second World War or the First World War. So you have this kind of, I would say,
well, no, during the Depression. I mean, because before World War II, you have the Depression, and that that brought immigration to a screeching halt in most places. Partly because
except for the orphans,
except for maybe and that would have been prior to the Depression. That would have been in the 1920s.
Yeah.
During the Roaring '20s, there was still a lot of immigration still happening.
I see what you're saying now. So that's why I said, let me explain why I think that, so you can put me in the right direction. So I see what you mean. Okay.
But yeah, no. Immigration crises especially tend to put a big damper on immigration because for lots of reasons. It becomes harder to travel. Destination countries sometimes don't want them anymore. It's a lot. I can tell you I can tell you. Let me share my own little family. Let me share a bit of my own family history. I'm Mexican American. I'm Latino. So my great grandparents on both sides. Well, no. Yeah, my great grandparents on my mom's side came here to California in the 1920s, I think. Lived here, worked here. I had my grandma and two of her sisters were born here. And then the Depression, and then the stock market crashes happens, and then the Depression sets in, and how can I say this politely? They were encouraged to leave. And so they went back home because it got unfriendly here.
Sure.
So they came before time. So they came when times were relatively good, and then when times got bad, they were forced back.
Right.
So and that's
normal because people might see that as a threat. If there's very few jobs, you don't want to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, it's understandable.
It's not right. I think that's.
I wouldn't call it nice, but it is understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. They went back to.
So they went back to Mexico. Eventually, obviously I'm here, so eventually my family came back anyway. Because later though, it took. Let's see, they got sent. They were basically sent back home right around in the early 30s. I don't remember exactly. Let's see. My grandma was, or they were. I think around 1931 or so is when they got. Like I said, encouraged to leave. And then my family came back in the, let's see, early 60s.
Okay, so are you a firstborn American in your family then?
It depends on how you define it, because, I mean, yes, I was born here and my parents were not. On the other hand, I have an uncle who's, my mom's brother, who was also born here a little before me.
Right.
So it kind of depends on how you define it. But yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that about how young. I mean, I still consider myself young enough, and I'm only a second generation. And you meet some of these others and they're blown away when you say that. They just assume I've been here for freaking ever. And I'm just like, no, I'm really not
Likewise.
that far newer than you, actually. You're right here with me. I'm just a few years older than you.
Mhm.
So I don't think that people look and put themselves and try to look through others. It's a big world of assumptions right now, making asses of everybody, really.
Yeah, yeah, that happens a lot. Yeah,
Mhm.
and yeah, so obviously the whole immigration topic is one I take seriously, and I get
Sure.
a little touchy. I get a little touchy about certain aspects of it.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
Agreed. Me as well. It's just a sore spot with me. I get it. I do.
So anyway, but
But anyway, okay, so back to the crisis. We have these movements, and you were saying that the economic. I think every one of us in here is going to
oh
agree.
yeah, oh. Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, a guy I talked to, he thinks that if he thinks that if the crisis climax is coming, his money is on some sort of major economic disruption, which it's possible. But again, I can't help but think that there's a lot of chaos across the globe, and we're not. This isn't 2 cycles ago where we could mind. I mean, our civil war. Part of the reason our civil war was a civil war is because we were not an important player in the world in the 1860s. So we weren't interconnected with other countries. So to anywhere near the degree we are now. So that was purely an internal matter. But now we're arguably the most important country on the planet. So if anything happens, if anything happens anywhere, I don't see how we can avoid getting involved in it.
Right.
Just because
wow, Dan, that's a very fair statement right there. There's really no way we're not going to have our meddling little pervy fingers involved.
Yeah. We're
kind of makes our country a bit of a douchebag because we really shouldn't be so intertwined.
Yeah, we have been. On the other hand, I think the Ukrainians appreciate us. So it doesn't all have to be bad. I think right now the Ukrainians are very grateful that we have the presence we do, and that more importantly, Trump did not win.
Right. Yeah, but wasn't it Biden's son that had some secret,
No.
Okay, that was Hillary.
I have a Discord account. Actually, and I think I have it on my Facebook too. Instead of a picture of myself, I have a little graphic created saying that Trump extorted Ukraine to try to damage Biden's candidacy in 2019.
Okay. Why is that funny? I don't get that joke. Tell me why that's funny.
It's funny because
hey, AB.
Biden being in office is the reason Ukraine is getting the help it is. It also would have been with Hillary, but unfortunately that didn't happen. It would not be the case with Trump because Trump is Putin's bitch.
Okay, so now I have a question. So what do you think about Biden and his plagiarism issue he seems to have?
It's not great, but on the scale of things, it's still a hell of a lot better than Trump.
Fair. What makes Trump so evil, in your opinion?
Oh my God, where do I begin?
Well, just give me like what is the big if you only had one thing to make a choice on, what would it be? What would be the biggest thing that he
The single biggest?
Sure.
COVID.
The way he handled COVID.
Mm-hmm. Because of him, there were 1 million excess deaths in this country.
There were 1 million what?
Excess deaths.
Oh, right. I got you. I'm sorry.
Because, I mean, people always die. People always die from flus. But they have a way of tracking, okay, in a given year, about this many people die. And we know how many people, and in the COVID years, this many people died. And given, since normally about this many people died, but in these years, this many people died, we know COVID, over the COVID years, 2020, 2021, 2022, there were something like 1 million excess deaths. And that, in my mind, is all on Trump.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have any thoughts on whether or not it came from
China? Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was like a weapon. What I think is they were working on it in a lab somewhere. Someone screwed up. It got out. And where China really messed up is they tried to hide it instead of being honest about it and letting people deal with it properly. They try to shield responsibility for the screw up. And that's what turned it into everything. I don't think they set out to try to cripple the world. I think it just sort of happened. But they're big. Like I said, someone screwed up, and those things happen. But their big sin, if you want to think of it that way, was not being upfront about it at the beginning, so people could take the appropriate measures.
Well, we do have a president that likes to lie.
Yeah.
So in all honesty, it's not that hard to believe, but they all do. I'm not saying Biden's any worse. Trump's just as bad. I don't think it's the single biggest thing would definitely be his handling of COVID, because it's not only COVID, but because of COVID, we had the lockdowns and the economy grinding to a halt to try to keep people from dying in even bigger numbers. And again, all that goes back to Trump. I put that on him. Sorry.
People may disagree. That's in my mind, that's all on him.
Do you think, going back to 9/11, do you think that Gore would have done a better job than Bush?
I honestly have no idea. It's hard. That's a hard hypothetical to figure out.
Did you think Bush did a good job with everything? Do you think that it was handled?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think he did okay. I think taking us into Afghanistan and Iraq was the stupidest fucking thing to do. And I think that was bad. I think the stuff he did domestically in the wake of it was not too bad. I think was okay. But getting us dragged into 2 wars that had really not that much to do with the attack was
not put that up there in the level of, say, Vietnam.
Yeah, it's on the how do you mean?
Well, just that was kind of not a war we should have ever been in.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Definitely on the level of Vietnam in terms of not something we should ever have done.
Daughter of a vet over here. Woot woot.
Yeah. I think those, like I said, I think his domestic handling in the wake of 9/11 wasn't too bad. I think was actually okay, but the wars were just beyond stupid.
Mm-hmm.
I actually marched in protest to at least one of them.
Did you?
I forget which one. I forget if it's when we went into Iraq or if we went into Afghanistan. I think Iraq.
Do you,
I think with
did
the
you know that? Did you know that the highest the people the cohort with the highest rate of infertility is those that were in those Stanny wars?
I have
They
not heard
blame
that.
it on the burn piles. Yeah, it's well known.
Oh, the burn pits. I've heard about that. I've heard about that.
Why was our government doing such things? Why were they burning batteries? Even I, an uneducated, non-military-esque person, knows not to burn batteries. And so why were they burning batteries? Don't you
No
think
idea.
the military should have known better?
Yeah, I do. I don't have an
batteries. That's what I'm saying.
I don't have an explanation, and I don't know enough about the situation to even speculate.
Man. It's just open
I know.
here. There's nobody listening. It's just a
No, I honestly don't know enough. I mean, sometimes people just do stupid shit. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe it was something more nefarious. I don't know, but I don't have enough info to even guess. All I know is, yeah, it was bad. They shouldn't have been doing it, and it seemed it hurt. It took a real toll on people and did some real damage. So it was just that both wars were just mind-numbingly stupid. They were not handled great, and we should never started it in the first place because it was, yeah.
Well, I don't know that much about it. It is a weird story. It's almost too ridiculous to believe. You know what I mean? It's really like something in a movie where you're, wait a minute, I think we've missed a few steps. Okay, that's all right. It's just a film. Don't get caught up in the details.
Yeah, no, those are both.
I just wonder, why did they not tell us the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Why did they only half give us stuff?
That's another good question. But yeah. Yeah, going into
just
Iraq and Iran.
To think about. That's all. Just things to think about. They're incompetent, if anything. If they're not guilty of doing it with intent, Dan, then they're at least incompetent, and some of them should be fired.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? This is stuff that you and I can think of, and who the hell are we, right? But
yeah,
these are people who are getting paid millions of dollars and live in mansions and have maids and pocket pooches. And they should be able to see what we see. You know what I mean? It's kind of frustrating.
Sure.
I think about this in relation to like when COVID was going on, and you have people starting to talk about something. And I thought, is this what it was like for, say, the Thomas Paines and the, Ben Franklins of the day, where was there groups of rebellions underneath bars or in the back of barns somewhere and plotting and, and I'm thinking,
well, hold on. Before you set your expectations too high, remember that even in the crises that turned out relatively well, people made a lot of mistakes and did stupid stuff. Not all of I admire FDR a lot. I think the New Deal was great. I think it was necessary, but not all of the agencies he created were good ideas. Not all worked well. Lincoln, great man, great president, really shitty at picking generals. He had to go through he went through some half a dozen top generals before he found Grant. He kept picking guys.
Were they auditioning?
I don't know, but he kept
not enough chemistry before we found, the perfect Kathy Lee.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, but he went, he kept trying to find the right guy to lead his armies, and it took him a while. He went through some real clunkers, and Washington, back in the American Revolution, I mean, he was getting his ass kicked all across New Jersey before he was able to turn it around. So, even the good crises had some, the people we like make mistakes, let alone people we don't like. even the people we like.
should really point out the people we don't like's mistakes way more than those we do.
True, but it's good to remember even the people we like will get things wrong sometimes. Yeah, FDR with his signing the internment order. That was a bad.
Did you just get that out of my freaking mind? I swear to God, I was just sitting here thinking you should ask him about FDR. And you what the heck?
Well, it's a pretty obvious one. Dad. The internment thing was a pretty that was a low moment. That was like he really should not have done that. That was bad. But going back to the witch trials and the QAnon now, that was a form of hysteria too. It was mostly limited to California because of anti-Japanese bigotry, but still, it was people.
I don't know anything about California. I need your perspective. You're my eyes on the ground. So
it's pretty simple
in California.
What was
from Dan's own words? Just tell me how you were feeling and what you were thinking.
Well, okay, so this country, I mean, let's be honest, this country has a long history of bigotry in general,
Sure.
But
you honestly believe that? I want to put that on the burner for a talk later. So
Okay.
keep going down. I want to talk about that specifically, but I want to hear this. Go.
And in particular, and the sort of the two big groups that came over were Chinese and Japanese, and fair point, we were at war with Japan, but I mean, what they did was just like, god damn, that's just flagrantly illegal, unconstitutional, unethical, immoral. I mean, damn, you can't just round.
What were they doing?
Well,
give me the year this was going on.
Well, after Pearl Harbor, I don't know. I'd have to look up the exact year, but it was right during the war. So it was after Pearl. So 42, 43, 40, 42, 43, 44, 45. They pretty literally rounded up all Japanese people in California, and also to a degree in Washington and Oregon. Not Hawaii, which is odd because there's even more. But anyway,
interesting thing. Okay.
And yeah, they rounded them up, and people talk about how the Nazis had concentration camps, and I think we need to adjust our terminology. We had concentration camps. We in turn concentrated Japanese. The Nazis had death camps.
Wow. Okay.
A little bit of a difference, we were not. We were the Nazis were killing people. We targeted one particular group, rounded them up, and put them in, like I said, holding camps. They were basically glorified holding cells for a number of years. But I mean, granted, we weren't killing them, which is good. But I mean, still, for no good reason. I mean, there was never. I mean, they were afraid of espionage and sabotage, that these people were, some of them at least were secretly Japanese agents, and there was little, if anything, ever found to actually support that. But people were freaked out, so they reacted, and excuse me, hold on a second. But they were freaked out, and so they reacted in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
Like with QAnon now, and like with the Salem witch trials a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah.
300. Oh God, more than 300 years ago now. Wow. Anyway.
Time flies when you're having fun, Dan.
Mm-hmm. But yeah.
So you now when you were a kid, so when
Mm-hmm.
because your age, that puts you born in this mid
70s.
Okay.
Early. I was born in 73.
73. Okay, I'm a 74 model.
Okay.
All right. But first of the year, I'm a January baby.
Okay.
So okay. So yeah, tell me what it was like then, growing up in California from your perspective.
I don't know.
In your elementary school years before you got in high school.
I had a pretty decent childhood, all things considered. I got
Did you view
lucky.
the world more? What was your perception of what you saw in your life? Those types of things.
Oh well, I was a kid. I wasn't. There were big things going on in the world, but I was a kid. I wasn't paying attention to most of it. The Berlin Wall came down in '89, and I was 16. I not really paying attention all that much, and I mean, I had a vague idea it was happening, but I didn't really understand because I'm a 16-year-old kid, and I wasn't as a big into history and politics then as I am now. So, I was, yeah.
I take it you weren't into like punk rock or anything.
Nah, musically, let's see. I grew up because when you're a kid, you listen to what your parents listen to. So I grew up on Motown and Elvis and Chuck Berry, all the great oldies. And some modern, some contemporary stuff because they would, have this radio on stations playing, modern music. But yeah, a lot of Motown, a lot of Elvis, a lot of Beatles. The classic 50s and 60s stuff I grew up on. And then later on, I started getting into hip hop because
Okay.
because the 80s.
What was the first cassette you bought with your own money?
I don't quite remember, but I do remember. Yeah, weird. I know, but I do remember. I do have a memory. I think it's a real memory. You can't trust your own memories sometimes because memories are unreliable. But I think I have a memory of being little. I'm guessing maybe 6 years old, and my older cousins playing a cassette for me, one that they had bought or a friend of theirs had bought. And it was arguably the first trap hit ever. Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang.
Yeah.
And that would have been 1979. And I'm as certain as I can be that happened. And so that's when I first got introduced to hip hop. Although after that, I didn't have any real exposure to it for another 6-7 years. But still, but no, California. I don't know. I'm also, at that age, my experience of California was limited mostly to my hometown, San Francisco. So that narrows it even further.
Did you surf or anything?
No, I'm not much of a beach guy, but but as a nomad, I was, and you hear the stories about kids who who go out and play, come back for dinner. I mean, in a lot of ways, that was me. I was riding the bus across town at the age of 10, 11 by myself. Gone for hours with no one, and pre-cell phone, so I'd be gone for hours with no one having any clue where I was.
Right. And we were all just fine, weren't we? A bunch of us were kidnapped, though. So keep your millennials inside.
No, well, yeah, I was about to say, yeah, it was, for a lot of us, it ended up being okay. But, a lot of us didn't survive that era. Nomad childhoods are rough. Okay. Gen X in childhood beat the previous nomad generation, the lost generation, beat their record for child suicide.
Wow, that's a nugget. I am absolutely not surprised by that at all, especially because my theory says that humans are in their adolescent stage. It makes perfect sense that we would have been one that was started the suicides. And I had known that we were a generation that I knew that Gen X was prone to this, but didn't realize that we had them higher than the before. That is very interesting.
Yeah, we beat the previous record holder, who were the Lost. Also a nomad generation. Yeah. In high school freshman year, one of my classmates and the guy I was on the wrestling team with hung himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's rough. It's a nomad. The nomad childhoods are rough.
Mhm.
That's just the way it goes.
A friend in school, Dan, did you ever have a friend that you were friends with die? Somebody you would say, that's my Betty?
No, sadly, no. I don't know. I've always felt I've never. There have been very few times and very few groups where I felt like I fit in here. I've always just been, in one way or another, I've always been kind of an outsider in some way.
Yeah.
Part of it is like, well, okay, I grew up in the Mission in a heavily Latin neighborhood of San Francisco, but we left it when I was still little, and we moved to like this mostly white neighborhood with not so many kids. So, and that kind of set a pattern for me of always being a little bit feeling the odd one out. And that it's kind of been my story ever since.
Mm-hmm. So you can relate to that archetype with the nomad as being kind of
Uh-huh.
fighter. Yeah.
Yep.
Pony boy. Stay gold, pony boy.
Oh God, that that when I was in grade school, that book, a bunch of my classmates read that it was very popular. A lot of people were referencing it. I never did. I didn't see the movie either.
Well, it was forced upon me to read it. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but it wasn't my favorite book of all the books that I read as a kid. But it was one that was, a class we all read it in class. The teacher read each chapter.
Yeah.
And then of course when the movie came out,
The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton.
Copy of it or something.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of Ralph Macchio, so I didn't get why all my girlfriends thought he was dreamy. I did not think he was dreamy. So
I think it's pronounced Macchio. I think it's pronounced Macchio, actually.
It might be.
Anyway, and after that, he didn't have much of a career, but now he's having a comeback with that Cobra Kai show. Apparently, it's very popular.
Well, I mean, I like the guy. Yeah, it wasn't anything like that. I just didn't think I had a lot of girlfriends that thought he was like the best thing since sliced
super
bread.
dreamy. Super dreamy.
It was at that age though where you start recognizing that you and your friends have different tastes. That's how young I was, right? So if they're thinking these, and I'm macking on this guy over here, and they could care less about him. I started thinking, well, why do you find that guy so dreamy and I don't? And why?
Oh, hey.
Why do
you want a cool?
like that way?
You want a cool piece of trivia?
Yeah, always.
You just said macking, right?
Macking, yes.
Yeah, that's a bit of extra slang. I know where it comes from now.
Oh my God, tell me.
Okay, so I was reading a book. Actually, maybe I'll show it to you. Where'd I put it? Where did I put this volume? Where'd it go? That it? No, that's not it. Well, if I can find it, I'll show it to you. But I was reading a book because I was doing some research.
I'll trust you. Go ahead.
I was doing research for a campaign. I won't get into that. I was doing a research on the history of San Francisco in times. Oh, here it is. I found it.
Excellent.
Can I switch my camera around?
Yeah, there should be a way you can edit settings. Let me see how that goes when you click.
Well, I'll just do this. Maybe you can see it. It's called the Barbary. It's called the Ghost. That's an old nickname for San Francisco. Anyway, so I was reading it. I was doing research for a fun project of mine, And this book is especially about an informal history of the San Francisco underworld.
Ooh,
You know,
what kind of
like
underworld?
like the crime and the seedy stuff.
Yeah, the seedy stuff.
The the fun stuff. Crime and drugs and sex and violence and all that stuff. So and I was reading about the gold rush period because again for my fun little personal project.
Right.
And let me see if I can find the exact quote because it's always better when you can. Here we go.
Okay.
So gold rush happens. People find out there's gold. People from around the globe start flooding to San Francisco to try to get gold.
Yeah.
Okay. So in October 1850, a newspaper called the Pacific News announced that more than 900 French prostitutes, basically,
Yes.
were heading to San Francisco. Unfortunately, unfortunately, only 50 of the French women arrived. So 50 French hookers arrive in San Francisco.
When they're expecting 900.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, okay, here we go. Most of these accomplished courtesans were attended by their pimps, whom they call macaro, a designation which the forthright San Franciscans soon shortened to Macs. So that term got its start here.
That
in the gold
is
rush.
interesting. The Mac. Do you know where the cur comes from? Because we used to say cur before things as well.
I'm not from. Oh no, that one I don't. That one I'm not familiar with. But yeah, that tripped me out. It's like holy.
We had our own language. My friends and I were very weird.
But that tripped me.
Friends everywhere. Mm-hmm.
That tripped me out. If I ever gave it any thought, I figured that term probably got started in L.A. or something. But no, San Francisco Gold Rush.
San Francisco. No,
yeah,
that's Roni is the San Francisco treat.
Yes, but anyway. And again, tying it back to the theory,
okay,
which is Gold Rush San Francisco is very interesting from the perspective of theory. One second.
The Gold Rush. What years are the Gold Rush? I need to look on my timeline and see how
gold is discovered at what's called Sutter's Mill, which is in California. Not crazy, not right next to the Bay Area, but not crazy far. In 1848. Word gets out. 1848 is when gold is found. This being the old days, word takes longer to get to places, and it takes even longer for people to move. So it's not until 1849 that the people start really flooding in to try to find gold. And that's why the sports team is known as the 49ers.
49ers, right.
From 1849.
Yes, I do remember that. They had that name for that reason. I used to host trivia night at a bar when I was in my 20s. I remember these weird, I think that's where I heard that little thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So these are interesting things. So if I was to think about the gold rush, I believe that in that time period, we were roughly around 8 to 9 years old. So I kind of
wait, what? Huh? Wait, what?
Right, as a species, because I have a theory of my own that I've written papers about, but I'm not a paper writer, so it's just a thing I've noticed, and it plays out. It just happens to play out, and so I think it's an interesting pattern. So it's not like I have some out the wall crazy idea. It's just I noticed a pattern that doesn't seem nobody else has noticed yet. And hang on just 1 second. My wee ones walked in. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. What was I saying? I totally forgot there.
Some pattern you were noticing
Right,
about
about my
something?
pattern. So I actually, I think you can tell I like human behaviors. I want to know why we do what we do, and this is something that I've been plagued with my entire life. Okay.
Hmm.
So I like watching, kids be kids and people be people, and I
Hmm.
just happened to notice something. My daughter, when she was a baby, did something very interesting, and it blew my mind. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized it lined up. And then that's what I've been talking about for the past, I don't know, like 7 years. Oop, we lost Dan. Oh no. Well, I don't have to say it to you. You guys already know it. Anyway, what do you think of Dan? He's a whole lot of fun. And a great way to have conversations that you can enjoy someone's company and have very little you agree on, per se. I like listening to him. I think he does have his own thoughts and his own perspective more than anything. And I think it's cool that he's willing to be open and share with us. Oh, he's come back from outer space. Okay, you're back now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I was just
Technical
talking
problem.
about for a minute.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I had a technical problem. What was that? Okay, so tell me about your pattern. What you noticed about people?
Okay, yes. So I noticed that when we took our human behaviors, so the developmental stages of a human life, and we paralleled it or superimposed it on top of our timeline of history, and we just compared the ages and stages of behaviors,
Okay.
we find a huge amount of things that line up. And so I couldn't deny it anymore. So I started writing about it. And so far, nobody has once said, well, wait a minute, you're wrong, because that right there proves they're not toddlers when you say toddlers. And I could go, oh my God, you're right. I can sleep again. Thank God I was wrong.
Can you, I'm a little, not quite clear on what you're talking about. So,
okay, let me show you something.
What lines up with what?
Okay, so if I'll show you a visual. This is the easiest way. I had an old friend made this for me. I will have to open it. So let me go over here. Basically, I started to notice a trend with open file. There it is. Okay. With the behaviors of humans on an individual level and those as a historical group or cohort. Because I'd already been interested in generations, and I'd liked that since the 90s, and I liked human behavior, I just happened to notice that there were some similarities glaring from the Tower of Babel to Jesus to Noah's and the Ark. I could explain every one of these experiences or stories or historical adventure on a level of where it matches with our behaviors.
Okay. I'm still not quite following, but I'm listening.
Yeah, I have to get the page to come up. Let me see. Here it goes. Okay. I've not done that a whole lot of times. When I show it to you, I'm hoping you'll see it then. Because people in here have been doing this with me for a very long time.
Okay.
Where is my stinking tab now? I can't find it. I think, I see what I did. Okay, hold on. I see what I did. Give me a second. Copy. I left the stream there. It made me leave it. I don't know why it did that. Okay. But I'll be back. Hold on.
Okay. In the meantime,
that's kind of. Let me get back in. I'll show you the image.
Okay. And I found the quote I wanted to read to you.
Ooh, what is it?
Well, it's about tying San Francisco to the generational cycle. This is from Generations, their 91 book, and this is from the biography of the Gilded Generation. And it opens with this quote. "The only population of the kind that the world has ever seen," Mark Twain wrote of the Gold Rush 49ers, 200,000 young men, not simpering, dainty, kid-gloved weaklings, but stalwart, muscular, dauntless young braves, brimful of push and energy, all having caught what Twain called the California sudden riches disease. 8 in 10 were between age 10 and 30. Making circa 1850 San Francisco the most monogenerational city ever seen in America, and among the most anarchic, with no families or laws, just vigilante justice enforced by hangings.
So they just kind of did themselves, lawed themselves.
To the extent that they did, yeah. It would take a good bit of while before San Francisco got anything into like an organized state. It was
the stories of the Wild West, right?
This is like the quintessential Wild West.
I love the Wild West,
especially San Francisco itself, and then the mining communities that were. It was actually reasonably far back then. Now that you think about it, because it's a 2-hour drive now from San Francisco to Sacramento, which is kind of up in mining country, or at least at the edge of it. And back then they couldn't drive. I mean, it was horses or walking, so it was actually pretty far. So San Francisco was the most nomad the most nomad city the country had ever seen, or probably will ever see again.
Interesting.
The Gilded.
I find the Wild West a fun one, but I did grow up in Arizona, and we used to act out stuff on our bikes, in the yards and stuff. We were.
And the Gilded are a fascinating generation too. Also a nomad archetype like us.
Yes, I did have streams on the Gilded. Yes, tell me.
And I like, how do they put it here? The Gilded lived perhaps the most luckless life cycle in American history. First wavers grew up too late to share the euphoria of the Transcendental Awakening, but in time to feel its damage as children. 2 decades later, last wavers grew up just in time to maximize their risk of death and maiming in the Civil War. They all came of age in an era of economic swings, flood-tide immigration, and a darkening national mood. In rising adulthood, they bore the human burden of transcendental conscience, becoming what Henry Adams described as a generation stirred up from its lowest layers. Those who survived became what Daniel Boorstin calls the go-getters of the late 1860s, 30-ish buccaneers who had seen Union armies camp on Brook Farm and cannons annihilate the most decent of their peers. After Appomattox, writes Brooks, the young men were scattering in all directions, their imagination caught by the West, and scores who might have been writers in the days of the magazine The Dial were seeking their fortunes in railroads, mines, and oil wells. Principle seemed pointless next to the confession of the plumed knight James Blaine. When I want something, I want it dreadfully. Blaine's remark, notes historian Richard Hofstadter, might have been the motto of a whole generation of Americans who wanted things dreadfully and took them. By most indicators, wealth, higher education, lifespan, the Gilded fared worse at each phase of their life than their next elders or their next juniors.
Wow.
a sacrificial one generation backstep in the chain of progress.
Right. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That
No,
I have that
no,
as
no, 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 no. For the Gilded, it was 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
2 steps back. Right. You skipped a beat. Right.
No wonder they behaved all their lives like survivalists.
Mhm.
Taking a cue from their laissez-faire guru, William Graham Sumner, they learned to root, hog, or die.
Yeah. Don't you think that might be why they wanted to get all of the middle-aged people with the loosey juicy so that everybody gets sick and die and there wouldn't be any of us old farts around to help the youngins with the depression?
What are you talking about?
I knew it, Dan. Don't worry about it. Just ignore everything I said. I'm just messing with you. Okay, let me show you my theory. All right.
Oh, sure.
So I'm going to
Okay.
try to make it as big as I can. So it's basically I take the human development and I parallel it with the world history.
Okay.
So this is literally something that was thrown together. Don't get too caught up in times and stuff because we're talking about ages and stages which don't have a start
Mhm.
date. You never know. Somewhere around 12 months they're going to walk. You have no idea when, but somewhere. So
Right.
that we have to keep that in mind as a species. We can. That's why I think the
Mhm.
Bible says things like we'll never know the day or the hour or the time. So it really just
True.
depends when we all start walking.
Mhm.
So okay, so the human body, and now all of these basic 12 stages of development come from a Dr. Piaget, which is like everybody agrees. So
Right.
you can go just like generations. You're going to find people that won't include this group or won't include that group, or they make it 6 instead of 10. But this is how I break it down because this is where it makes sense. So at first we have 2 non-physical stages. That's our fetus
Uh-huh.
and our death and decay. And then we have
Mhm.
10 physical stages. And so we have our first grouping of 3 newborn infant baby. Those happen 3, 3, 3.
Mhm.
3, 3. There's your 3, 3, 3 for all you gematrias. So what we get there is actually the stages. So if you look over,
Oh,
you
okay.
see
I see what you're getting at. Okay. Mhm.
yes, the behaviors. So you can look at
That's
this. So let
interesting.
me show you where this is. So now forget what these pictures look like, okay? Because we all agree that history is all. That's why they're kind of jokey. But this is going to be a human expression of a much more advanced, because now a baby can describe the womb. And that's where our ancient ancestors were able to describe and write down celestial things that we haven't been able to see. Because from a conscious level or a creation or an alien spit you down here, or it doesn't matter how you got here, you started out as a newborn. And so you acted like a newborn, which, by the way, is 1 dimension because you're on a plane or flat when you're newborn. You're on your back, and the father,
Right.
Scar, the mobile, you get it. And then you move. So here in baby, we got Noah's Ark, right? That's when a baby starts to sit in the bathtub. That's what Noah's Ark means. It's not birth. Noah's Ark is bathtub. It's the draining of the bathtub. The bathtub filled up, and I sat there sitting because the baby is a 3rd dimensional, or a second 2-dimensional being, and can now sit. And then a toddler becomes a 3rd dimensional and can now stand. And that's our ancient times where a toddler does what? Builds with blocks. And another thing that's interesting to note here is that the human eye, a baby's eye, develops in a certain pattern of colors. It starts with black and white and red. Then it goes all the way blue being the last color the eye can see. Now, we don't recognize this because 1, we're babies, and 2, it happens very fast. But this is how that you can go look it up. This is how the eye comes to see color. We can't get purple or the imaginary color, right? The ultraviolet color until we have gotten all the way to blue. And then that makes the red look purple. So that's why we have those colors for symbols, right? So then look there, baby. Why do we bronze our baby shoes? Because that's the stage we were in. Okay, so you see where I'm going? So then I get to
Interesting.
preschool. That's our modern times. That's where we're going to, so you're going to see kings and queens come here. Because remember, we have ancient times. So we're moving from, this is ancient Egypt and early civilizations in the Iron Ages. And then we move into, now we're getting into the Roman, Greek, these types.
The classical period. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. And of course, we have the Renaissance comes in there, which we already know. You and I know that's an artistic generation. And so that pattern is playing out over and over again as we grow. And so we have preschool is where her Greek and gods come in with dragons and kings and princesses. And look what age that is. That's exactly where we move from nursery rhymes to fairy tales. And it shows right there. It's unbelievably beautiful. And then if I keep going, now let me show you where Jesus would be. So I think Jesus is an I am that showed up early. So that's just one of those beginners. So a human being goes through 3 I am stages before they leave childhood. And your whole, as you know, your whole life is broken up into 4 segments, right?
Roughly, yeah.
Cycles. Yes. Well, only one of those 4 segments is broken up again. And it's broken up here because when you're a child, you grow really fast. So you go through these stages quite quickly. Give me just a second. Okay. So, so when you have these periods, what was I saying right there? Well, I put in here where you can actually see what these are, our toddler. So we were also doing a lot of other things. Toddlers do what? They like to destroy things. They have the toddler laws of mine. If I see it, it's mine. If I want it, it's mine. If you have it, it's mine. I want it, mine. So they have an I am moment. That's what we were getting at. When they turn 3, or you have another one at 12 months. Every one of these stages is a mini I am. I am able to sit. I'm 2-dimensional. I am able to stand. I'm 3-dimensional. I am able to run. I'm 4th-dimensional. I am able to, race and, bigger, right? The dimensions. So those scientists that try to tell you all that crazy stuff about the universes and all that bullshit, this is what they're talking about. It's how the human mind comes to understand the world. First, I am in a supine position. Then I sit up. That's 2 dimensions. And then I can, or roll over, and then I can sit up. There you go. And then I can run. And then, so I do it that way. So once I become my first 6 years old, or I am, right? So my preschool into school age, that's your first moment of I am. And that's what I think. Jesus was a preschooler that showed up right there at the beginning, right on the cusp.
Oh, hey, do me a favor. Email me the link to this file, because I'd like to take the time to look it over a little more.
Oh, I would love to get your thoughts. I think one of the things that I think some people get a hard time with is they think I'm trying to discount what they already know. And that's not the case. I'm trying to give you something that adds another layer to the research you're doing. Because when you can see this, it just blows your mind. You go, oh my God.
So in this scheme here, we are in our current modern age, it's parallel with what stage of development are you saying? I'm trying to see it. I can't see it on the screen.
I believe that right now we're going into our second I am, or our 13, or our bar mitzvah, or our meet shmita, which is happening right now.
Right in adolescence.
We're adolescents. We're having a puberty. And ironically, I'll tell you this, if you'll go this far with me, Dan, because once you look at this, you're a smart man, you're going to see what I see. That's one of the reasons why I try not to stay hokey pokey, because I really did this is not some crazy, it really matches. And I think it's neat, if anything else. So I like to share it because I feel like it helps people. So it helped me.
I get that.
What's going on.
Well, yeah,
But
like I said, send me the file or link me to it or whatever, and
I
I'll
will.
I'll
I'll
I'll,
email it
I'll
to you.
look it over. Yeah, email.
But it puts
Ah.
us at our adolescence. It puts us at our second I am. And then we're going to have a period of adolescence. So we don't get our third six till 18 years old. 6 years old, 12 years old, 18 years old. This is our rite
So,
of passage at
do-
13 here.
Do you have? I mean, do you have any guesses on how long? Because these each of these stages have been taking seems like centuries. So, any idea how long before we get to the
Actually, I
next
do.
step?
I was working for a while on a clock because I believed that if I could estimate how times developmental stages, because I can pretty much guess the percentage of time a baby is in this stage, 3 months, right? So I can get really close if I could understand relative how much the percentage that the quote unquote God's clock gives us.
Mm-hmm.
And then with that information, I feel like I can get a closer. And so I was working on that. And these percentages were very close. But I needed somebody that was a little bit more scientific to help me. So I didn't get very far. But I did believe that I could guess the future. Because I think I can guess when we'll be 16. I think I can guess when we'll be 24. And I did that as an experiment with the wheel that I was working on at the time. And I guessed we'd start driving roughly around the same time. They say we'll all be having, not just some of us, but everyone will be having automatic cars or some type of vehicle of that sense, right? So the future is also predicted the same year that my little clock happened to predict. If I put us on a 16 when we start driving. And then when I put us on 24, which is when the average human starts having babies, that also put us for pod babies. Same year, same roughly era of when they expect everyone to be Gattacaing at home.
We'll see.
And I found those two things to be quite interesting in themselves because I think that you can predict a lot more of the future. And say this did get in the hands of the bad guys and they did know we were teenagers and they were trying to get us all riled up and join cliques and do this and do that and do all of the normal teenage behaviors while they used words on me like you're restricted, you're grounded, you have a curfew, do what I say what I do, don't do as I say, not as I do, as our politicians have been clearly showing us. Do you know what I mean? These behaviors. Thoughts. I'm done. That's my presentation, Dan. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I do. So I'd like the opportunity to look it over more. That was interesting.
Well, it'd be cool if you did, because I'd like to sit down. Like I said, no one's ever challenged me, and it'd be really rad if I was wrong, right? That would just be awesome because I did something. I found that it was wrong. I tried something.
Well, it's a little bit like Strauss and Howe's theory. It's hard to prove wrong, except by watching how things play out and see if it matches what you predict.
And look at you, though, my master historian, who can help me with some of these behaviors. Because if I explain to you what we did at that age, you might be able to tell me how that was being expressed through history. Do you see what I mean? I can give
it a shot anyway.
Yes! Dan's on board. Yes. So excited.
I probably need to wrap this up because there are things I got to do, but this has been fun. But just back to, so we were talking about the future real quick. So this is how, based on the theory and what I'm seeing, this is how it looks like how things are going to go. This crisis will run to about the end of the decade, I think. Again, no one knows for sure, but 2030, give or take. It won't be, it's almost certainly, it'd be highly unlikely that it ends exactly on 2030. A couple years sooner, a couple years later, right in that range. And then we'll have a high, which will last about 20 years. These predictions about, people are going to have to adjust their charts of what the global population is going to look like, because we'll almost certainly see an uptick in births around the world because you always do in a high.
Sure.
Birth rates will begin. Well, they're not. I'm not. We're going to have a new baby boom. Maybe not as big as the last one, but there'll definitely be an uptick in birth rates because there always
Are you
is.
not worried about the amount of infertility we have going on?
Not really. For one thing, I suspect it's not affecting millies as much because they haven't been around and haven't been as
Okay.
exposed to as much.
They're just now having the babies. Okay.
Yeah, they're just not having the babies, and also, it certainly wouldn't be affecting today. So to recap, I believe the generation we call millennials goes younger than anyone else is saying. Well, I mean, and I'm just following Neil
I know
Howe's
you do,
lead on this. So, my guess is the real first members of what we could call Gen Z or Zoomers or whatever are probably in high school right now, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's an adult right now, if you're not an Xer, you're a millie.
Yes, I think the last of the Gen Zs are going into high school. I think the ones that
No.
group that's in high school.
Going into high school? Yeah, maybe.
They're
it might-
in high school now. Yeah, but they're the cuspers. They're the end of the train.
Yeah.
They're the caboose. before they take over
so-
or
right,
alphas,
and-
whatever. Yeah.
So millies extend down into I believe into the high school, like the later high school. Like my guess is like at the very least today, high school seniors are probably millies, are gonna be, so all these kids in grade school will be, by the end of the high, they'll be the ones making the babies. Or actually a little sooner than that, probably. So your later millies and your Gen Zers will be the baby makers of the high. And we'll definitely see an uptick. It's an open question on how big an uptick, but there will be one. And that'll last about 20 years, again, give or take. It's not that precise. And then you've been seeing articles maybe about how, church attendance is in decline, religion's in decline, especially in the U.S.
Yeah.
I just keep saying wait 30 years.
You think it'll come back around? You think Jesus will be resurrected a third time?
No. But I do think there will be a new interest in religion and spirituality. Because it happens.
Who's going to win, Scientology or Catholicism?
Don't know.
Who's going to lead this time?
I don't know. I think as someone who's who's more or less an ex-Catholic, I do take an interest in what the church's future like, and it doesn't look great.
That sounds like another topic for a day.
Yeah, if they can't, they've got a chance right now. This crisis is an opportunity. They have a chance. If they followed the right path, they could really increase their appeal, draw the millies back in. They could really make themselves a magnet for drawing in believers. But unfortunately, they're not. Unfortunately, they're not doing what I think they need to do.
They're busy making robot nativity scenes, Dan. They have so many things that they're doing wrong right now.
So if they squander this opportunity, they're looking at counting this decade and the next two, about 30 years of atrophy before the next chance to revitalize, before the next awakening, which will come in about.
Bottom feeders, Stan. Are you gonna be? Do you have a ticket for an underground bunker?
No.
Are you don't? Okay, so you're out here in the mud with us. All right,
Mm-hmm.
fair.
So yeah, but anyway, in about 30 years, we're going to enter a period where people are interested in religion and spirituality again to a degree we haven't seen since the last awakening. since the
Right.
60s and 70s when everyone got all religion crazy. And we'll be there again. In the same way that you get a crisis once a century, roughly, about once a century, you get this period where people are super into religion, and we'll have that again in about 30 years, give or take.
Do you think that that will be that New World Order stuff they talk about since Reagan or something like that?
I don't know. I don't know. It partly depends on how the crisis plays out, because the New World Order people, I mean, they do have a little bit of a point in that once we get out of this crisis, assuming we haven't all destroyed each other, just like in the last crisis, we tried to create something like a stable global order. We're going to try to do that again, so that hopefully we don't.
Dan, I
screw
feel
things.
like at this point, our friendship, I have to tell you something because I like you.
Mhm.
If you hang around me,
Mhm.
you might change some of your thoughts. And so if you really
well.
don't want to change your thoughts, I'm not going to argue with you. You'll just by osmosis, you'll start questioning things a little bit more than you do now. Are you prepared for those questions?
Yeah, I do. I'm pretty.
Yes!
I know my own head. It takes a lot to change my mind. Yeah, you have to have good
No,
evidence.
I don't even want to. I just like making people think of things. That's all.
Oh, okay, that's
I
fine.
don't like changing people's minds. I'm not one of those people. I'm just a question. I just ask. I'm just an oracle of questions. I'm a Muppet that asks questions.
Yeah, but the next two turnings will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the high looks. Well, actually, I mean,
Gattaca.
it'll be
I
interesting.
think it's going to look like the movie Gattaca. I think we're going to have like babies with like perfect DNA, and they're going to walk around so beautiful.
I mean, maybe, I don't know.
That's a fun one. Dan.
Biotech keeps advancing. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how things go, and there will be, and the high, baby making will be a priority all around. It's just the thing people will be into. I suspect.
I suspect that as well, because as adolescents, what do we like to do more than anything in the planet, Dan?
Make babies.
Yeah, or at least try. So I
Mhm.
do agree with you there. I absolutely believe that that free love is going to make its little rotation.
Well, the free love will come a little bit later, because the next awakening should be what like the last few have been about, which is sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, hell yeah, let's go. No, not me. I'm not going. I'm out. I'm going to sleep this time.
Oh well, we'll be a little.
Last 9 lives. Look, I'm Joni Rotten 999 now. That's just my last 9.
I mean, if
out.
It's going to be weird, you and I, since we're about the same age, saw the tail end of the last awakening as little kids. We saw it, but however, we will see the beginning of the next awakening as old people. Because if it comes in about 30 years, as I expect, I'll be about 80 if I'm still alive. Wow. So I'll see it I'll see the beginning of the next awakening from the perspective of an old man. That should be weird.
That is. So I asked somebody one time that was 100 years old. Wow. If she liked it better today than she did back when she was young, 100 years ago. And she said, definitely today.
Yeah.
I thought she'd say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, because I mean,
about to walk in her shoes. That's what she's getting out before she finds out that the cycle repeats.
Yeah.
Lucky bitch. Anyway, she was a sweetheart. I didn't mean.
Yeah, I'm enough of a historian. I'm enough of a historian to know that the further back you go, generally the worse things are. Right. Medical technology is worse as a general rule. As a general rule, people are more brutal. Things are rougher the further back you go. For the most part, I would not want to live in the 1850s, honestly. So, or
I don't actually want to live anywhere back in time. None of that sounds interesting, and neither does the future. I'm A-okay. You know, like in the Men in Black, where he like gets kind of retired and he just gets to go back to his little island of Cape Cod.
Mhm.
That's kind of what's going to happen with me. I have it all worked out. You know, me and my upper self, or whatever people call Jesus, whatever your flavor is. I just call it my upper me. You know, my
have you ever seen a movie called Demolition Man? It's a Stallone movie.
Have.
It is one thing I really like about that movie is I don't know. I don't think they meant to. I don't know if the writers were aware of it, but they actually kind of get a piece of the cycle very right. So it's in this future, right, where you know everything is controlled and very regimented, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it follows upon a totally, and they say it, the world tried to destroy it, society tried to tear itself apart, or whatever. Basically, it's like saying, oh, this is a high following a crisis. The only difference is they got the years a little bit wrong. I watched the movie, and so in the year 2030-ish, they're at the end of at the end of a high. Basically, that looks like a high. That's what a high could look like, kind of. Only they have it happening in 2030 when reality it should be 2050. Like I think they thought that the things would happen faster than they actually do or have. But they have the sequence right. They got the time scale a little off. But it's like rewatch it when you get a chance. And
I'm going to do that. Now you made me think of something. This is going to be a problem if you're going to make me think of things, Dan. Now you made me want to do something with you. I love breaking down films and looking at them from how I see them. And you see the generational cycles. And I think that's freaking fabulous. So would you want to do, like, I have another friend that likes to look at other patterns in films. Would you want to do like breakdowns, and we could like all pick a film like that? We'll all watch Demolition Man. We'll write down the things that we noticed, and we'll have a little panel, and we'll talk about our unique perspectives of these films. Would you want to do that with me?
Yeah, I'd be open to that. Sure.
Excellent. I'm gonna try to. So we got to find Spudgy, and see. I'm talking to my chatters. They'll know who I'm talking about. Call out we need the pang. And Lai could be in there as well. That'd be rad. Okay, my break coder.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you've done great. This is going on 2 hours. So you've got a couple more minutes, and I know you want to go.
I do have to get moving.
Okay. So,
but yeah, the Demolition Man would be fun. Demolition Man would be fun to review. The Magnificent Seven's another good one.
Okay, I got it written. Yeah, that's cool.
And at some and
we love doing stuff like that. That's something we do on the weekends for fun.
And of course, I think I already told you the whole Star Wars saga. I think is a great illustration of the theory.
Yes,
whether or not
you explain that, I think that is so awesome, because when people can see it like that, when they can see a part of the film that they never noticed before, it adds to the story altogether. And that story is part of our story. And that's why we relate to it. So Generations unlocks a part of the story. It's it's a layer in the onion that you've got to recognize is everywhere. And it doesn't have to be Strauss and Howe. I know some people don't like his theory, but they don't understand what the theory is saying. It doesn't matter Strauss and Howe. The solidness of these patterns of how humans behave on this ping pong back and forth. Overprotected, underprotected, overprotected, underprotected, summer, winter, spring, fall. This is a pattern that plays out through all of our life, through the leaves, through the nature, through the seasons. So it's here, it's solid. So I can look at it and I can use that as another way to know thyself, which is what the big book tells us to do. And every religion there is, or belief system, says know thyself. And this is part of knowing thyself, knowing where you are in time. What's your
Mhm.
generation? What's your archetype? What designed you that way? What happened to you that made you have these feelings and these expressions that you do? Exactly. That's
Mhm.
all part of the process. And so I think you're a super rad person, Dan. I really enjoy talking to you. So we're going to do this again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Hmm. All right. Well, it's been good talking to you, and yeah, we'll have to schedule it by email when we can do this again.
Absolutely. I'll be on it.
Okay.
I have a birthday party tomorrow. So, at least on Sunday, I'll get you.
All right.
So don't be
No
bored.
problem.
Right.
All right.
Thank you so much,
All right.
Dan.
And email me that file or link me to
I
it when you
will.
can.
Oh, yes. Let me write that down too. Yes. And I have a couple papers that I could send you the links to that I've actually had put up. I don't know. I felt the urge that I needed to have them published so that there
Okay.
was a date and a time and everything.
Right.
Not that I care. I want somebody to steal it. I just want to know that I thought of it. That's all. That's
Gotcha.
all. That's it for me. I'll go to
Oh.
the grave knowing I was one of the first to think in this
Okay.
direction. I'm not saying I'm the only one, just one of them.
Gotcha.
Okay. I'll see
All
ya.
right. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And to the chat, whoever's still standing there listening, hanging out, thank you very much for hanging out and listening to me and Dan talk about these cycles. I hope that you could see some of the patterns and, start to put some dots. It's just neat to know. It helps you know where you are, like I said, in the world, what you're doing here, and know thyself. You should know who you are there as well. That's another little layer. Thank you and have a good day.